So in today's world, if you do something, but you don't post it online, did it even actually happen? Right? And that could be like eat a meal, go to the gym, have a party. And obviously I'm joking a little bit, but kind of, not really, right? Like it's helpful to just kind of laugh at that, but also to notice the cultural moment that we're in is pretty crazy. The amount of engagement that happens on social media. And it's not always a bad thing. It's not the point of this post. But because it's so common, I think we fail to consider the impact that our post and our engagement has on others. So Sunday, we talked about how we should have, as God's people, we should have a community and a love for one another that is compelling to the outside world. Jesus says that the world, will know us by our love for one another. And then that becomes a theme throughout the New Testament. And that's what we looked at Sunday, is that we should have that kind of community. And so in this world of social media, sometimes we forget to think about what impact that has. And to be clear, I'm not saying we live our community on social media, right? At its best, social media is a supplement to community. It's certainly not by itself real community, right? Sometimes we can get fooled into thinking we have community because we got a lot of friends and we get a lot of likes. That's pseudo community, right? That's not what we're made for. We need in-person, deep relationships. We need to be known, not in this curated form that we put out, for the world to see, but in our deepest, darkest. So that's sort of another, talk and another sermon. We actually covered some of that in Affirmative Faith podcast a few months back. But the point today is that we also don't want to overemphasize the impact of social media. We don't want to do our community day. We also don't want to underemphasize the impact that it can have, both negative and positive. And here's what I mean. I mentioned Sunday that sometimes people leave churches because they feel like they were cliquey, right? We've had people come to us because they said they couldn't connect to their last church because it felt like people weren't cliques. And a lot of it's super subjective. I get all of that. But they've also left our church because they felt like we were cliquish. And again, some of that's just learning to navigate. I get that it's just not quite that cut and dry. However, I also think we can do better at considering what may or may not be contributing to those perceptions. Because I think sometimes we think, we're not a cliquey church. We're very welcoming. A new person comes in, we say hi, and I hear that. By and large, the thing that people say when they come and join our church is they felt so welcome whenever they came in. So that's something we do well. But I think when we think about the whole clique thing, we get defensive and just think about the in-person gatherings. Well, we said hi, we welcomed our group or whatever. And I think in today's world, it's not limited to that. And so sometimes what people are getting, where they're getting that message can come from online, right? Like if they're trying to get connected or they're starting to get connected, but then they see that community group or that, they're just not making the invite list, right? And these people keep posting online, but they weren't invited. Then they start to think that, they're not really a part of this deal. And to be clear, let me just say that part of the work that we as Christians need to do is to not be as sensitive to that stuff, because our identity is in Jesus and not in other people, right? Not what people say, whether they invite us, whether they like us or not. And so that's true. That's part of the community we should have, is we're not as sensitive to that. However, on the other side, I think we can do better. I think we can do better at considering what kind of impact our posts have on other people. So that's what I want to do. I want to look at Philippians chapter 2. I want to read verses 3 and 4 because they're super practical. I would encourage you to take some time after this to sit down and process and pray and make a plan on how to implement it. And as a part of that, I would encourage you to read verses 1 through 8 of Philippians 2, because these verses that I'm going to read today are sandwiched in the midst of one of the most rich passages of Scripture, in my personal opinion. So I would encourage you to read 1 through 8 as you sort of seek to apply this as an individual and as a family. Okay, how do we do this better? Set in that. There's some beautiful gospel wrapping around this text. But verse 3 says this: "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others." So my challenge to you is, before you post, think about this. Apply all of your social media interactions, run it through this filter. Okay? What do I mean? Well, it says not to do anything out of selfish ambition or conceit. Well, probably if we're honest, that would eliminate like 90% of social media interactions, right? Like if we did that, nobody was posting out of conceit or selfish ambition, there probably wouldn't be a lot on there. But nonetheless, the point is we need to be asking, why am I doing this? Why am I making this post, right? So just start there. Before you make the post, say why. And then be willing to answer honestly, right? And you might need to bring some others into that conversation, right? Like, hey, do you see this in me? Or maybe you need to run through your feed and process with people in your community group or in your family, your spouse, your kids, your parents, and say, okay, does it look like I'm asking for something that I shouldn't be asking Facebook for, or Snapchat or TikTok, whatever, right? Am I looking to be validated on here, or am I looking to curate this image on here? So we need to ask those questions. But I want to go more specifically, that there's a lot of implications just for social media in general, but more specifically to loving one another. I want to think about group posts. Like, so when you do a group event and then you post it, I think it's important to ask, hey, was everyone invited? And you might say, well, who's everybody? Well, it just depends, right? I don't mean your whole friend list. I get it. Not everybody's invited to everything, and that's okay, right? Jesus spent time with 120 that followed him a lot. Then he spent more time with the 12, the disciples, and then he spent, even within the 12, there was 3, Peter, James, and John, that were closer. And then even within those, John was the one who Jesus loved, the disciple who Jesus loved. So that's okay. We don't have to apologize for being closer to some than we are others. That's good and right that we have close, tight-knit friendships. What I'm suggesting is, do you need to post about those gatherings, right? Before you post about those gatherings, ask, hey, was everyone invited? And by everyone, I mean whatever that situation applies. So if it was a community group activity and everybody was invited, even if some didn't come, they were invited, sure, that's fine. It's not going to offend anybody, right? If it's very clear why it was this group of people. But if it's not clear why it was this group of people, then that leaves room for people to think that they were left out or to think that they weren't loved. And again, there's some maturity there. Everybody has to get over that. But I think as Christians, what he would call us to do is, A, ask why are we posting it? And so first of all, we might just, instead of posting it to social media, maybe we just send those pictures to the group that was there and we have it to remember and enjoy. But maybe, not only why am I posting it, but then the second question might also be helpful is, he says, don't just think about you, but think about others, right? Think about the interest of others and consider them more significant than you. So even if you really want to post it, if it's going to have a negative impact on others, then you probably shouldn't. So was everybody invited? If the answer is no, then you got to think a little bit more. Okay, what impact will this have on those who weren't invited? Okay, and maybe it's really clear why they weren't, but if not, then that's going to leave room for miscommunication and hurt feelings. And so just consider that, and maybe you don't post it. It's not that radical of an idea to just not post something online and instead to send it to a group. But we have to be intentional. We have to think about this. Again, our community shouldn't happen solely online, but we also shouldn't minimize the impact of our online presence and how we love one another in the midst of that. And so I think if we ask these questions, hey, why am I posting this? What am I hoping to get out of this? What do I need? Do I need to post it? And then if we answer that honestly, and there's still pure motivation there, then we go, okay, well, what impact is this going to have on others? And so I think that will be transformative, and it will be helpful. It will be helpful for us as we build community, as we welcome others into that community. Again, people are going to hear that you hung out with other people. That's okay. It's not like you got to be secretive and, don't tell them about this gathering. That's silly. Those sorts of things have been happening and will always happen. But social media in today's world makes all of that it turns the volume way up on that. And you got FOMO, fear of missing out, and people are getting anxious, and there's all sorts of even mental health issues around this whole idea of social media. And so we as Christians can do better. We can do better, and we can think about an impact that it has on others before we click post. So I think there's true implications for us as we love one another. Again, I'm always open and would love to talk to anybody further. If you have questions, you can hit me up on Facebook or my email, or just find me at church. I'd love to talk anymore. Appreciate you guys checking these out. Share them if they're helpful. But otherwise, I'll